When Friend Helps Friend, an episode of Girl Life at a Boarding School written by L.M Montgomery, published in the Philadelphia Times, Sunday morning, April the 14th, 1901. Republished as More Blessed to Give in Girl's Own Paper on December 1939, and included in the collection of long-lost stories in After Many Years, published in 2016. The fresh spring sunshine was coming down through the hall windows of the college library, casting banners of gold over the floor and tables, and lighting up the rather somber nook known as the English corner. There were only a few students in the library, and those few seemed bent on amusing themselves rather than on studying. Lectures and examinations were almost over, and convocation was the theme of most of the conversations. Eleanor Dennis and Irene Cameron were sitting at the magazine table, talking to each other in the low tones required in a library. Not so low, however, but that the girl sitting in the English corner could hear all that was said. She'd been dreamily turning the leaves of a volume of essays and listening to the rollicking chorus of a class song sung by some irrepressible freshies on the campus outside. But when she heard a certain name spoken on the other side of the partition, the listless expression left her face and was replaced by one of keen interest. "It is such a pity that Helen Lewis cannot come back to college next year," Irene Cameron was saying. "She is the cleverest girl in the junior class." "She is the cleverest girl in college," said Eleanor Dennis decidedly. "I believe she would stand an excellent chance of graduating with great distinction. And you know no co-ed has done that yet at Lakeside. For the honor of the co-eds, as well as for her own sake, I wish she would complete her course." "There's no chance of her coming back at all, I suppose." "I fear not. I suggested something of the sort, but she answered quietly that it would be impossible. She must feel terribly disappointed." "Yes, I'm sure she does. But you would not have supposed so from her manner or from anything she said. You know, she's a very reserved and independent girl. I think her pride is as averse to being pitied as to receiving favors. So I merely said that all her classmates would regret very much if she could not come back." The 99s will be lost without her next year," said Irene. "She's always been the leader in everything. It's such a loss when a brilliant girl like her has to drop out. That's really the only reason why I envy those clever girls. They mean so much to their classes. There are dozens of respectably bright girls to one like Helen Lewis, and it seems a double pity that she must go. Do you know what her plans are?" "From a remark she made, I imagine that she intends to go right to work at something, whatever she can get to do, I suppose. It will be hard for her with all her ambition, but she is plucky and self-reliant." "If it were a girl like Winifred Fair now," said Irene impatiently, "it wouldn't matter. She is hopelessly dull. But she has any amount of money, so she can stay here while Helen Lewis has to go. It is really unfair." "Hush," said Eleanor softly, with a warning motion of her hand towards the knot of gold-tinted hair visible above the somber bindings of Motley's Dutch Republic. Irene colored. She had forgotten that Winifred Fair was reading in the English corner, and she wished she had not spoken so loudly. Certainly Winifred was not clever, but she was a girl that everybody liked, and Irene regretted her thoughtless words. Winifred, however, had possibly not heard, and had certainly not heeded them. Nobody knew better than herself that she was dull. For that very reason, she admired the talented girls all the more, and she had a girlish admiration for Helen Lewis. It was somewhat sentimental, perhaps, for Winifred Fair, in spite of her 3 years at a coeducational university, was a good deal of a schoolgirl at heart yet. But it was also very warm and sincere, and the news that Helen could not come back to college next year seemed to her nothing short of a calamity. She went musingly down to the co-ed's dressing room after the other girls had left the library and put on her hat. When she came out again, a tall, dark-haired girl with thoughtful brown eyes and a plain but striking face, was coming slowly down the main staircase. She smiled brightly at Winifred, and the two girls went together down the steps and across the campus, where the musical freshies were still celebrating their emancipation from the thraldom of exams. It was not until they left the college grounds and turned down a quiet street shaded by big chestnut trees that Winifred spoke of the subject uppermost in her mind. "Is it true, Helen, that you're not coming back to Lakeside next year?" "Quite true," answered Helen quietly. "Oh, I'm so sorry," cried Winifred impulsively. "We can never get along without you, Helen. Are you sure there's no chance?" "Yes, I'm only too sure. You know, Winnie, that I'm not rich, and indeed it has always involved a good deal of self-sacrifice on the part of my family to send me here. But I hope that I might be able to make it up to them someday. Now, however, Father has met with heavy losses, and it will be impossible for me to come back next year. I must go to work at once. It would be foolish to deny that it's a great disappointment, but I try to think about it as little as possible." "Oh, Helen, if it's only a question of money, you need not be disappointed," said Winifred eagerly. "You know I have plenty of my own, 10 times more than I need. Let me help you. I'd be so glad to." Helen had flushed crimson and then turned very pale, but she answered gently, "Thank you very much, Winifred, but that is impossible. I could not borrow money under such uncertainty as to when I could repay it." "But I don't want it repaid," protested the other girl. "Can't you take a little favor from me after we've been such friends?" "That would be still further out of the question," said Helen, rather coldly. "I know you mean it in all kindness, dear," she added hastily, seeing that Winifred looked hurt and disappointed. "And I thank you very sincerely for your offer. But I couldn't accept such a favor from anyone." Winifred relapsed into troubled silence, and in a few minutes their paths separated. Left alone, Helen walked rapidly to her boarding house. In her own room, the pride and courage that had sustained her before her friends almost failed, and she sat down by the window with tears in her eyes. She had been so eager, so ambitious. Her 3 years at Lakeside had been filled with success, and she looked forward so radiantly to the next year, when she hoped to graduate with honors. Then would come the proud and happy homegoing, and after that, the finding and filling of some worthy place among the world's busy workers. Just then, the sound of voices drifted up to her. At the open window below her own, 2 other co-eds were talking. Margaret Mitchell, a senior girl, was saying in her high, clear voice, "It may be difficult to learn how to confer a favor gracefully, but it is much harder to learn how to accept one gracefully. Anyone can refuse. Blunt independence makes a merit of refusing. Yet it means only an ungracious pride that will not grant to a friend the privilege of helping us." Helen winced a little. She wondered if her refusal of Winifred Fair's offer could be classed under the head of ungracious pride. Upon reflection, she decided that it could not. Certainly she could not stoop to accept charity. She shut down her window quickly and began to study half-heartedly for her last extra examination. When it grew too dark to study, she went to the window again and watched the crimson glow along the hills across the lake and the crystal glimmer of a star above the fir woods that crested them. She was still sitting there when somebody tapped softly at her door, and Winifred Fair came in. She came up to Helen and sat down before her. Her pretty face was flushed, and her eyes sparkled eagerly in the dusk. "Helen, I've come to tell you something and to ask you something," she said, speaking more rapidly than usual. I could not keep from thinking about it after I left you today. No, don't say anything until I finish, please. I want to explain it clearly to you if I can, but it's so hard for me to put it into words. You see, it's this way. I'm stupid. I'm awfully stupid. I know I am, and that I can never do anything to make my class or my college proud of me. but I love Lakeside very much, and I want to do something for it. You are clever, and we are very proud of you, and it's a great thing for our class to have you in it. Oh, don't you see, Helen? If you would let me help you, it would somehow seem as if I were doing something for my class. I should be so proud and grateful. I felt all this today, but I couldn't express it then. I had to go home and think it out. Oh, don't refuse, Helen. You don't know how much it means to me. I shouldn't feel sorry. Superfluous, so useless. If your pride makes you refuse, it is selfish pride, for it takes from me the sweetness of doing something for my dear old class, all that I can do. My money is my own, you know, and you can look upon it as a loan if you will. That isn't the point I care about. Winifred leaned forward and put her arms pleadingly about her friend. Helen did not answer all at once. She was thinking earnestly. She tried to put herself into Winifred's place and to look at the matter through Winifred's eyes. Her own love of class and college helped her to understand. Margaret Mitchell's words came back to her too. Ungracious pride. Yes, indeed it would be that if she refused Winifred's offer again. "You'll let me help you, won't you?" said Winifred. "Yes, Winnie," said Helen softly. "Oh, thank you, thank you." She added quickly with a little break in her voice. "It means so much to me." "No more than it means to me," said Winifred gravely.